Dallas native Joe Ruiz Grandee was born November 19, 1929. A third-generation Texan of Castilian, French, and English ancestry, Joe's family already had a place in the history books. His great-grandfather was a Castilian nobleman who settled in Corpus Christi. Joe's grandfather, Benito, built the town's largest dance hall and saloon and was extremely affluent in the community. On his mother's side, Joe's great-grandfather captained a clipper ship that ran the blockade for the Confederacy between Port Lavaca and New Orleans. His maternal grandfather was one of the judges who presided over the famed Sutton-Taylor feud trial. Joe's parents settled in Dallas, where they operated a boarding house. Growing up in the house, Joe's artistic ability and love of history were apparent at an early age. The house was located next door to the National Guard Armory drill field, and young Joe spent his days admiring the soldiers' attention to detail and strict discipline. He spent much of his free time drawing the soldiers. During a train ride in 1944, Joe's path would be set. Through the windows of the train car, he saw the shining mountains in Montana. The mountains would become the background for many of his paintings. Joe began reading everything he could get his hands on regarding the mountains and the history of the Old West. Very early on, he committed to being an authority on his art. He felt that knowing about the events and landscapes he painted made him a better artist and his pieces more authentic. Joe would attend the celebrated Onspa Art School in Dallas for a short time. He credits his brief time at the Onspa School for his accuracy in portraying animals and humans. Joe left the school preferring to work on his technique on his own. A true perfectionist, Joe began collecting artifacts so that he could get better detail in his pieces. In his early 20s, largely spurred by their son's tenacious love of the Old West, Joe's parents bought a ranch with the idea that their son would one day take over the family business. The ranch venture was short-lived. However, it gave Grandee time to improve on his artwork. Being isolated and surrounded by his Old West gave him the time he needed to decide what he wanted to do with his life. The answer was paint. After returning to Dallas, Joe began selling small pieces of his work. He also met the love of his life, Merline. After dating for a year, the two would be married and begin a partnership that would take his artwork to a new level. For over 50 years, Merline would often pose for her husband's pieces so that he could better authenticate the human form. A history buff in her own right, Merline also acted as her husband's art dealer, accountant, and kept a catalog of the ever-expanding collection of artifacts. It was at Merline's suggestion that Joe submitted a painting of Billy the Kid for the cover of True West magazine. Publisher Joe Small requested more of Grandee's artwork for future covers. Joe credited Small with helping jump-start his career, and the two became close friends. As his artwork began to grow in popularity, Grandee became increasingly fixated on acquiring more for his Western collection. Not satisfied owning just a military uniform or Indian headdress, he wanted everything. It is this obsession for accuracy which has placed his talents in high demand. The majority of his works depict actual events circa 1830 to 1900. He covers everything from the mountain men on the frontier to the U.S. cavalrymen to the Mexican-American War and on through the Civil War and westward expansion. Grandee has drawn great praise and some condescension for his lifelike portrayal of the Old West. Of the character he paints, Grandee has said, "It took a certain breed of highly individual people to go out there and accomplish what they did. The American character was shaped by Western movement, whether for good or bad." Joe's dedication to authenticity in his paintings is legendary and goes beyond having the artifacts. When painting, Grandee almost always has someone dress the part so that he can have a better understanding of the subject's range of motion and strength. His desire for authenticity was carried out to a T when he was commissioned by then-President Lyndon Johnson to do the official wedding portrait for his daughter Linda's marriage to Chuck Robb. Grandee's friends posed in full 1880s militaria for the portrait. Grandee's reputation growing, a special showing of his work was set up for then-actor Ronald Reagan in Arlington, Texas. Reagan would become a Grandee enthusiast, and this would eventually lead to Grandee's best-known piece, The 20 Mules of Death Valley. Commissioned by the U.S. Borax Company, the famed painting would appear in promotions for the Death Valley Days television series. One of Joe's proudest moments came when the Marine Corps used his painting of the flag raising at Iwo Jima for a medal to be given to the Indian code talkers of World War II. This became especially memorable for him when his wife became a recipient of the same medal. Another shining moment in his career was when his painting of a Texas Ranger was selected to hang in the East Wing of the White House in 1972. Throughout his career, Joe has had many firsts. In 1971, he became the first ever official state artist of Texas. A few years later, he became the first artist to have a one-man retrospective at the U.S. Capitol. He is also the first Western artist to ever appear on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, who would become a lifelong collector of his work. Over the course of his career, Joe's collection of Western artifacts has surpassed 6,000 items and has been certified as the largest and most complete personal collection in the world by the Smithsonian. Today, the majority of Grandee's artwork and corresponding artifacts can be found in the Joe Grandee Museum of the Frontier West Gallery at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. The 2012 Rick Smith Spirit of Texas Award recipient, Joe Grandee.